Okay, so we're going to talk about covering with tissue paper, and the first thing I've done here is take some tissue paper. This is special tissue paper. I think it's called Asaki tissue paper, but I bought it from Volera Products. So it's real tissue paper made for covering model airplanes. It's very light. It's really nice stuff to work with. But because it's when you cover with it, you end up spraying it with water and shrinking it or alcohol. You'll turn the frame into a pretzel. So what you do is pre-shrink it. So what most people do is they will put this and tape it or glue it or dope it down to a wooden frame that they've built. I'm kind of, I would say, lazy. So all I do is tape it to an outside window, in this case a sliding glass door in the back of the house. And then you just take it and you douse it with water, and then that's going to shrink. Just let it go. Just let it, nice and wet. Now you just go away and let it tighten up. Then you pull it off the window and it's ready to use. So now it's been a little while, and you can see that this stuff is all nice and smooth, relatively smooth. This down here needs to dry a little bit more, but you can see it's nice and smooth, and I'll just pull this off, and then I can load it. Be quiet, kitten. Then I can load it up in the printer and print my lozenge pattern on there and start covering the wings. Alright, so what we have to do is I've printed a piece of the lozenge out on paper, and I'm figuring out which way the grain goes. And if you tear, you can see the grains going along the length of those. It's going that way, but I want those to be perpendicular, because I want on a wing, you want that grain to go lengthwise. So I know those are going to go perpendicular on the wing. So now I put this over the piece of paper and I cut out my tissue, and since I have the piece of paper, I already know, where it's going to print perfectly, hopefully, and basically you're going to take that and glue it down. I just use a little glue stick. You can use tape. I've used tape before. Tape seems to work, but the glue stick is, in my opinion, works a little better. I'm not really sure why. I guess sometimes with the tape it can get hung up in the printer. I'm not sure. But anyway, just kind of put a little bit of glue on there, and then you carefully put your piece of tissue down. And again, the idea is that I want since those are going to be repositioned and put together vertically, essentially, I want to make sure I've got my grain going the right way. So you put this down and you try to make it as wrinkle-free as possible. There's enough time, and you can actually pull things up and down a little bit. Like here, I think I mess up and I have to pull it off. It's sticky, but it's not impossible. The tissue is surprisingly robust. I mean, it'll rip, but like I said early on, when I was getting it wet, it's really nice to work with. It really, it's wonderful. And then when you do wet it down, it tightens nice. It really makes you look better than you are. So it's very nice. It's very nice tissue. Better than the old silk span and old tissue I used to use when I was building these when I was a youngster. So maybe something's changed. But anyway, smooth that out, make it as nice as possible, and then you can just feed that through the printer, and it should print right on there. In the meantime, here are donuts that Peter made. Homemade donuts. Oh my goodness. These are going to be so good. Oh. There he is. Oh, what a donut. Oh. I'll never get any airplanes done now. All right, now this is speeded up because it's more of the same, but you can see I've cut this, I printed it, and I've cutting it off of the little piece. I actually put it on the wrong side of the paper, or the wrong area, so I actually didn't print as much as I wanted. But now, here is the underside. Printed that out, and now I'm just cutting it apart, pulling it off. Now I've got two pieces of tissue that are lozenge and ready to go. So, and see, that's the way that it's going to fit along the top of the wings. And then the bottom will just fit right along like that. Now I know it should be pieced together too, but I didn't bother. And you take a nice sharp blade and you cut this, and you know which way it's going to fit. And then, in this case, because I cut these pieces apart and I'm fitting them together, that's realistic, but it also turns out to be the only way to actually make it work in this case. And this stuff dries pretty fast, and you can start covering almost immediately. It actually stays pretty well. But there's an example of those are put sandwiched together, and then I will just put them on. Now this is the actual covering procedure. I take a glue stick, and you put glue stick around all the edges. In the old days, I used to put dope and stuff all around the edges and nothing in between. But now I've taken to sort of putting on every little piece of exposed wood. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but you can see I'm putting on the spar, for example, and on the ribs. Now you take your piece and you wet it down with isopropanol. Now usually you use a spray bottle, but I don't have one, so I'm just brushing it on with a soft brush. Now you got this nice wet isopropanol. The tissue or the ink won't run because it's iso, it's not water, straight water. And just plop this down. And then you just use your thumbs and you just kind of carefully pull it out and make it as wrinkle-free as you can. It dries pretty fast because it's isopropanol. I'm cutting little relief places with a very, very sharp razor blade. And then I have to set this down because it will, even though it's been pre-shrunk, it will warp a little. So you put this down, and notice I put it over some quarters. That's to just elevate it slightly above the surface. And then you weigh it down with whatever you have. In my case, a bunch of spice jars. And then you just let it dry, and it will dry pretty fast. At which point, you pull it apart, and you take a super duper duper sharp razor blade, and you trim it. And people use razor blades from actual razors used to cut your face, cut your beard, which apparently are very, very sharp. I tend to just use a regular old razor blade, and you gotta cut this off. You can also do it different ways. You can see I'm trying to cut along the scalloped edge on the trailing edge, and it works very well. It's not perfect, but it's good enough. And there you have a nice, sharp, beautiful piece. So now it's time to put on the top. So again, I speeded this up because this is just more of the same. You put that all around the edges, and make sure I put a little dollop there where the V-strut's going to go, because I'm going to cut that out at some point and have a place for that strut to fit, a little pocket. But notice I put it along the ribs and everywhere it's going to be. Make sure it's nice. It's nice and sticky, but not hard to work with at all. Do the same old thing. In this case, you don't have to worry about putting anything underneath it. You just need a flat surface. You don't have to elevate it because you've already put the bottom piece down. You also should cover the top and the bottom with something, pretty soon. Don't let it sit around, because if it's covered on one side, not the other, it does have a tendency to shift and change, and it will pull things out of whack. Now, the only difference here is that you're covering over a convex surface, but it's not difficult. This tissue works really well, and I'm just tweaking it on either side, pulling it around. You cut reliefs with a little bit of with a razor blade sometimes to make sure that it'll go around little spots you can see them doing. But it doesn't have to get every single solitary wrinkle out. It's amazing. When it dries, it tightens up really nice. And again, this tissue makes you look better than you really are, to be honest. You just let it roll. When it's dry, again, this is maybe 10 minutes later or so, you just simply pull it off, and now you trim all of that. And you just do the same thing. Keep trimming and just do it very carefully. You can sand the edges too a little bit if you want to. but it works very well. When you do piece the tissue together and then put it down on something, as you're pulling when it's wet, you do have to be careful you don't pull it apart. When I did the top wing, as I did that at least one time, it's not the end of the world. You just got to go back and sort of splice it together again. It's still all pretty dang forgiving, so it's nice. But again, a sharp blade makes all the difference in the world. You can slice right around and get things perfect. And that is essentially part of the bottom wing. And they do everything else the exact same. Looks pretty dang nice, I think. Top wings next. Perfect.